Welcome. This is part of our Centennial celebration for Sierra County, and we have today Helen Lorraine Gordon Chavez, who is going to talk about ranching in the Caballo area. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about when and where you were born and what your early recollections are of the area around Caballo or Palomas Gap.
Yeah, well, I was really born, you know, that old two-story building there across from the courthouse. It used to be I was the only kid born in the hospital. But my mom had pulled a big old heavy cover over on herself, and she was having convulsions, and so they took her to the hospital, and I was born there. And I know I was premature because I just weighed like 4 pounds.
And so you also you go by the name of Dogie. And
Yeah.
so you want to talk about your nickname?
My dad named me that. He named all of us. If he couldn't think of a name, he'd invent one. He made up names for everybody. And he said I looked like a Dogie calf because I was always skinny and pot-bellied, and I looked like a Dogie calf, so that's what he named me.
And that's stuck all these years,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And what about your, where were your parents from before they came? Didn't they homestead in this area?
Yeah, they did. They homesteaded over on Caballo Mountains at Granite Springs in 1922. And my mom was born at Tularosa. And my dad was born at La Luz. And my grandparents came across in a covered wagon. They'd come from Texas before, and most of their kids were born here in the territory of New Mexico. But they came over to Caballo and come across and through the Palomas Gap and down to Caballo and settled it there. And there was my dad's 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and my Aunt Jessie and Uncle Milton had 10 kids. So there was a whole, I guess, tribe, you'd say, of us there, and we stayed there until 1938, when everybody had to move so they could build a Caballo Dam. And I remember my dad went up the creek horseback, and he came back and told my mom that he had bought a place from Jacobo Candelaria. So we moved up there. We had a team and wagons, and then we borrowed 2 more. And us kids, let's see, I wasn't 8 yet, and Faye was 10. No, she's going to be 10. And we had to dig up all the corral posts and load them in the wagon and haul them up there and come back and tear down some more corrals and just get rid of everything because they were going to back up all the water there and just ruined everything. There was big, beautiful trees and orchards and stuff along the river. And remember Sam Crouch and his family had a big orchard, and they made their living by selling fruit and vegetables and stuff. And after that, you know, people went different places, and it wasn't the same anymore.
Mm-hmm. How were the families that were displaced? Were they compensated? Do you remember?
They paid. I don't remember exactly. You know, I didn't pay no attention to money. I didn't know nothing about money. But they paid you. It wasn't much, for however many acres you had and like that.
So, were your parents, did they come out of Nogales, New Mexico, or no, they were from La Luz and Tularosa area? Okay, all right.
In fact, my mom's dad was from Australia, and he was raised by an aunt there in Tularosa, but I don't know anything else about him, how come him to be sent over here or anything. But my dad's folks came from, let's see, somewhere in Texas, down kind of in the south part of Texas. And I kind of think they came for their health, you know, because there's a lot of tuberculosis and stuff down there, and they came out here in a covered wagon and settled around Alamogordo and those little towns over there.
Was there, in any of the history of the family, was there anyone that you were particularly proud of?
I don't know. I had a whole bunch of cousins that served in the Second World War, so yeah. My dad's brother, Uncle Jim, he died before I was born. He was in the First World War, and he was gassed in France and came back and died. I think he was 23 when he died. And then my Uncle Joy, Daddy's brother, was in the service too, but he came out of it okay.
So, do you remember any special stories that were passed on through your family, and any stories about the whole Caballo area, things that would stick out in your mind?
Well, I remember my grandpa telling us and laughing that my dad was the youngest of their kids. And he said when they lived over there around La Luz, that the Indians would come when they butchered, you know, the Indians would come, I guess what's that tribe?
Mescalero?
Mescaleros, yeah. And they were friends with them. And he said they would just take the guts and go like that and throw them in the fire and roast them and eat them. He said that one old guy tried to get my dad to eat one of them pieces of guts and throw it in there. No way, I wouldn't touch it. But my dad was just 5 years old when they came across. And I've got a picture of
Is this?
no, let's see, that one with all those kids.
Let's see. We've got some great. Oh, is that? There's this one here.
No, I think I didn't even bring it, but it was a picture of a bunch of kids standing in front of a schoolhouse, and
There's two. Let's see.
yeah, that's it.
Is
right
that
there.
it right
And
there?
that's my dad right there.
And this was its. This was its.
I think it was at Alamogordo. Gene Bates' father, I think, is there. I talked to Mary yesterday, and she said she thought that was Gene's. And so I guess he went, you know, they went whenever they could. They didn't have all these age limits and stuff. But I know he used to tell us that the first job he ever had was when they first moved over here. He was herding hogs down below, you know, where Velma Hopkins lived, where the post office was. There was big old walnut trees, like, I mean, huge. They'd been there for ages. And everybody in the country had come and pick as many as they wanted, and then they'd turn hogs in there, let them fatten up on those walnuts. And he said that was his first job, and he got 5 cents a day.
And about what year was that?
Gosh, he's born in 1897, so he's about 6 then.
So right at the turn of the of the century, yeah. So, well, as you grew up here, and you were born here. You were born in the old hospital up on the corner of Date and I believe it was Date and 3rd Street, wasn't it? That's where the old hospital was.
And Margaret Harris, she delivered me, and she was our doctor for ages. And a lot of people said she wasn't a doctor, but she was. She'd been in the service too.
What do you remember about Mrs. Harris?
Well, I remember one time we were playing at the schoolhouse at Caballo, and I was catching flies and hit my finger and broke my finger. So we didn't even have a vehicle at that time. We didn't get one until later. Anyway, Mama got Mr. Weber to bring me to town, and they went over to her house, and she was canning peaches. And she just dried her hands off on her apron and got like a milk nickel stick, put it on there and fixed it and wrapped it up, and about 2 weeks later I broke the other one. She said, "I know what you're doing. You're trying to get out of milking a cow." She was really a good person.
Did you know anything about her gold hunting?
We didn't hunt. My dad would never kill a deer. I never had even.
No, I meant Margaret Harris.
Oh, her.
Yeah, did she? I'd always heard that she knew where a lot of gold was.
Oh, I don't think so. I never heard her say anything about it. But you know, did you ever hear about the Shandon mine over there on the Caballos?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There, I know Velma told me that Mama and her would they would raise chickens and butcher them and take them across in a boat and sell them to those miners over there. And they found quite a bit of gold because that lasted for several years, that mine in operation. So, but I didn't pay much attention to stuff back then. I wished I had it, but I didn't.
I think that in that time, and what limited reading I've done, the Victoria Chief mine, it hired about 150 people, and then the Shandon mines hired about 150 people, and so the freight wagons that were on the Palomas Gap Road, or that toll road, were pretty busy hauling ore out and then bringing supplies in. So it makes sense that they would take chickens up there for the miners to
Sell everything they took. So.
Do you recollect what it was like when they were crossing the river down there, going up to the gap? Do you remember anything about the trail that ended up in Palomas, or that freight wagon road?
No, I remember that we would go up to Palomas, and there was 2 stores there, and one was Frank Bemis, and the other one was Maxwell, yeah. And Frank Bemis had about anything you needed, tools, harness, shoes, material, and all kind of groceries and stuff. And I remember Daddy used to butcher a steer, and we'd wrap it up in old sheets and then in a tarp and haul it up there, and he'd sell the meat and for stuff that we needed,
Then you could have a credit on your account there,
Yeah.
and then when it came time the year later or whatever, then you bring another beef up. So it was really a system of bartering,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit earlier, you were talking about when you were rounding up cattle down in the river bottom there where the Caballo Lake is now, and you talked to your dad about wanting to go up on the Palomas Gap. What was his...
Well, that was during the war, and there wasn't any able-bodied men around. So me and Faye and Sitter, we rode with Daddy all the time and did everything that he could do except rope. He roped the calves and drag them up to the campfire, and we would flank them and hold them down while he branded them and earmarked them and vaccinated them. I remember I had a top of a boot, and I think Mama had poked holes in it, turned it wrong side out, and that's where the vaccinating gun and all the vaccines were in there.
Mm-hmm.
And we vaccinated even way back then for malignant edema and black leg.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And those would have been diseases that would have killed the cattle or the calves.
yeah, it
right?
travels fast, and it would just killed everything.
And so in order to protect your herds, you would go in and
Yeah.
vaccinate like that. And your dad was always wanting you to work, right?
Oh,
no,
yeah.
No time to play?
He was a workaholic. Well, when, when kinfolks and friends would come over to visit and stuff, boy, us kids would take off outside. That was the only time we had to play.
What did he tell you when you told him, when you made the comment that you wanted to go up Palomas Gap, you wanted to go up on the road? What did he tell you?
He said, no, we ain't got time. We got too much work to do, We'd have to go up, we'd start from the house before the sun was up and go down. There wasn't any houses or anything down there like there is now, and then go across the Caballo Dam and ride the lake. And when it first started, when it first come up, boy, there was a lot of quicksand and stuff. I can remember Sitter and I used to ride a lot, and we had us an old sack, and we'd kill rattlesnakes. I mean, big, big rattlesnakes with long rattlers. We had a great big cigar box at home, and somebody stole it. It was crammed full of rattlesnake rattlers. We never found out who took them, but somebody did.
Somebody wanted all those rattlers from all those snakes that you killed.
Yeah, and see, I never did live over there on the homestead. Did consider live there, and they used to ride a horse down and cross the river and go to the old Caballo schoolhouse. And one time, this horse they rode was a real cold day, and there was big chunks of ice. There wasn't much water in the river, but enough for the horse had to take you across. And I guess he got mad and he pitched them off right in the middle of the river. And they had to go to school and get all dried out. You know, we had one stove in each room at that time. And that's when Mama told Daddy, said, we're going to move off of this mountain and find us a place to live. So they did. And that's where we ended up living over there.
Now, where, when you talk about up on the mountain, was that up on the Caballo side?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen that little light-colored peak up there? That's there's a spring there, and it's gravel spring.
Gravel.
I mean, granite spring.
Granite Spring.
Yeah. And that's where their homestead was. And in fact, Alma and Bob ended up with it. They've still got it. Mm-hmm. Alma still has it now. And I think I've got a picture of it over there.
We'll show some of these pictures and mark them. When you're talking about, you know, the family and the homesteading, what do you recollect about some tough times at around the turn of the century? Because that was before we became a state, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, no, we became a state in 1912, I think.
So,
Yeah.
but this was about 19.
Well,
So-
when my folks were born, they were born in the territory, you know, but then it became a state in 1912, and they were married in 1922,
Okay.
and so it was a state by then.
Mm-hmm.
But one time, Mama had an old treadle machine over there, and this, what was this guy's name? I think his last name was McDonald, or McDaniel, that's what it was. And they came through there, and I guess they went all through the house, and he broke all the locks on the, you know, the little drawers and stuff. And Daddy had one little wind-up record player, what do you call it?
Controller.
Just a small
Gramophone, yeah.
Yeah. And they had 4 or 5 records. And so when they came back from where, I think they'd been down on the river there where his folks lived, and when they came back and found all their stuff, they'd stole a bunch of groceries and just made a mess, you know, and stole that record player, I call it. And so whoever was sheriff, I can't remember who was sheriff then, but anyway, they went hunting for him, and they heard him playing one of those records, and that's how they found him.
So they got their record.
Yeah.
What was that called, Jay?
Gramophone?
Gramophone. That's
Yeah.
it. So they got their gramophone back, and
It was just a little one, you know, kind of square with a kind of a horn.
Yeah.
You know. And that was before I was born, so, but that story I heard all my life.
so you were born what, in the 1930s?
1930, October the 11th. I'll be 81 next month.
So you were born right during the Depression, then, weren't you?
Yeah, my people would ask me my name, Daddy said, and I would say Helen Lorraine, but I'd say, he said, yeah, that's right, Helen no rain.
Instead of Helen Lorraine, it was Helen No Rain. Well, you went to school at the Paloma School or in the Caballo?
At the Caballo school.
What are your recollections about the Caballo School?
Oh, heck, that was fun. I always liked grade school. I didn't like high school, but I liked grade school. It was not very far from our house, that house right there. And in fact, I think it was closer to the house than our corrals were. We used to have to draw water out of the well, and we had a coaster wagon with a couple of small barrels that fit in there, and we'd have to haul water down to the calves when we were weaning calves, and God, it seemed like they drank 1,000 gallons each. And I can remember hauling water, that old rope, and I think that bucket weighed as much as I did. Oh, it was hard to get out of there.
So you got some good muscles out of that, did you?
Yeah, we all did. We had no problem losing weight. We had problem keeping what we had. But at that time there was a lot of kids that they just got to go to school a few months out of the year. So they were like 15, 16 years old and still in the 3rd grade because people talk about depression. They don't know what a depression was, I'll tell you.
Well, and I think that in talking to some of the early educators at that time, there was a decision to be made. I mean, they could just call off school because they weren't going to get paid, or they could just call off school during the time when there were, like, if there was any kind of a harvest or something, and then they could come back to school later. They had a lot more freedom to make a school calendar than they do today.
Well, they needed the kids to help with the work, and the harvest and stuff. Because my Aunt Valley, she was married to my Uncle Joy. She was a school teacher, and May Stone was my cousin. She was a school teacher there, and Miss Stinson. You remember Joetta Stinson? It was her older sister. She taught school there for quite a while. And Dogie Chavez. And I remember she taught the 1st grade, or 2nd and 3rd, or something like that. I can't remember.
And where was the schoolhouse?
Huh? It was
Was it where is today, or was it?
No, the old schoolhouse was down. Did you ever know where Faulkner's store, and they had a one pump station, and the old post office? It wasn't too far from there. There was an old road that went right up that way, and then went up the kind of where Judy and Smitty's house is now, up that way. Okay. And that was pretty good size. I should have went by the schoolhouse and got that old picture, because I've got an old picture. It went through the fire when Mom's house got on fire, but it just destroyed a couple of faces, So.
Now, did you go to high school down there as well?
No, went to high school up here.
Okay, so
Went
you
to the 8th grade.
8th grade there in the Caballo, and then during I think it was probably during 37 or 38, they built the Caballo school that's
it's
here.
there now. And while they were building that school, we had to ride the bus, and Dogie Chavez, that's Ernesto's dad, drove the bus down to the Caballo Dam, and we went to school in some old barracks buildings. I've got a couple pictures. I'll bring them up so you can copy them. Okay. And I can remember, because it was that kind of pressed board stuff, and it had cracks in it, and you could hear the wind whistling through them.
And you were huddling around that stove trying to keep warm.
Yeah.
Did they burn wood, or was
Yeah.
it burned? They burned the wood.
Yeah.
Where'd they get the wood, or how did they get the wood?
They would, different guys would cut wood and haul it in, and I don't know if the school paid for the wood or what, but I can remember how many people were so mad at the government when we moved. We had to all move out, and they went in there with saws and stuff, because they didn't have like heavy equipment like they have now. And they burned all that wood. They wouldn't let you have it. And I can remember seeing those big old cottonwoods and walnut trees and bodark apples and all different. And all along there we had like plums growing along the river, and everybody go and pick all the plums they wanted, and then they'd turn the hogs in there, and the hogs would eat all the rest of them, and even chew up the seeds. I can remember them cracking them.
That would have been like the sandhill plums, right?
Yeah.
That were growing in the bottom of the.
Yeah, but they made real good jam.
Oh yeah, real good jam.
So,
And
but they, you know, people could have took that wood and used it, but they burned it all up. I mean,
so we love our country, but sometimes we don't trust our government, do we?
boy, you said it.
So when you went to high school, you went up to Hot Springs High then?
Yeah, we lived about a mile and a half from the old Caballo post office down there where Kelly lives now, Ed's daughter, and we caught the bus there, but we had to walk down there and then walk back, and they had a school bus that went up the creek and picked up the kids, and it was like a van with seats along the sides. You'd drive up the canyon and pick up the kids and take them to grade school, but anybody that went to high school, you had to find your own way down there to catch the bus. We had this old Mr. Darr drove that bus, that old blue and white one during the war. You know, you couldn't get tires or nothing, and it looked like one of them old cracker boxes, old blue and white one. And I remember, because I didn't like high school, there was too many cliques, and I just didn't get along with them. But they used to call us river rats. And we called them alley cats.
Things haven't changed, have they?
Now it's Thompson.
River rats. We heard that when we interviewed the people at Array, that when they came to Hot Springs High, they were called river rats.
Yeah, well, see, the bus came all the way from Gary, Array, and Caballo, and Palomas, and dumped us at the high school. And so,
What year did you graduate?
1948.
So it was probably, and then probably a miracle you ever got through school, right?
Well, that's one thing my mama said, that her and Daddy never got a chance to finish school. They had to go to work, you know, to earn a living. But she said, my kids are going to go to school if I have to scrub toilets. She said, they're going to go to school. And we all, my brother and all my sisters, we all graduated from up here.
And then you went on, and where did you get your nursing degree?
In Hotel Du School of Nursing in El Paso.
Did you go down with Daisy
Uh-huh.
Wilson?
Yeah.
Really?
See, Daisy, they used to live down there. We've known each other forever.
Uh-huh.
And she worked at Carrie Tingley as a nurse's aide till I got out of high school, and we both went together there. And we went from 48 to 51. And then we both came back to Carrie Tingley and worked there. And we started as graduate nurses, and then we had to take our state boards, and then we passed those and got our RN degree. And I worked there off and on for about 30 years. But then I also worked in California a couple of times too. So I've worked about 40 years, and I said, this is enough. I had it about up to there with Santa Fe and their rules.
The regulations. And were you not the
I was the public health
the
nurse
public
for
health? I think you
about
used to
7 years.
Yeah, I think you gave me shots when I was.
I can remember Bill Norton. Did you know him? You remember him? And he was my dad, and him worked for the Ladder Ranch and different places around. And he told me, he said, "No, Dogie, if I'd have known you was going to give me shots, I'd have been better to you when you was a kid." he was just so funny.
And Billy Norton, that's Totsy's dad, right?
No, it's Totsy's grandpa.
Grandpa. Oh, we're off a
Yeah,
generation.
yeah.
Okay, that's easy to get off a generation. Well, anything, tell us about your family. I mean, you married
Reuben Chavez.
Reuben,
I've
and
known him all my life. We went to school together, and he come from a big family too. So there was 8 kids in his family, and
Now, was he from that area
He was
down there?
from Animas Creek, yeah.
Okay, Animals, uh-huh.
In fact, he was born right there on the place where my youngest son lives, Matthew.
Uh-huh.
He was born right there.
Really, right there at their place.
And then they moved later on after the kids got out of school, they moved to town. And he worked for, I'm trying to remember, he worked for different contractors. And then he went to the Army. That's when they still had the draft during the Korean War. And he was working for the Bureau of Reclamation by then, and when he came back, they hired him right back. So, and he died in '81 of cancer. So
Now, tell us about what your recollections are about the Flora School. There was a school there that...
yeah, but I never knew anything about it, and the only one that kind of knew was Pat Padilla. And he said, yeah, he could remember when he was younger that there was but it kind of went from Perchy Creek, angled over toward Hillsboro Road. He said, I can't remember exactly where it was, but he said it was along there, and a lot of people that worked for the what was the name of that mine up there at Gold Dust, the mine at Gold Dust, and kids from there and from Ladder Ranch and different places around went to school there. But I'm going to look for that picture and find it.
Because at one time there were somewhere between 21 and 26 school districts in Sierra County, and that was one of the school districts. It must have been very interesting as an administrator in Sierra County when you had a mine that would suddenly start production somewhere, and you had all these families move in, and you'd go, oh, we've got to have a school there.
Yeah.
And then they would shut a school down somewhere else. I mean, they would go through this redistricting all the time.
Yeah.
And so Flores was probably one of those that just may have popped up and been there for 5 or 7 years.
Well, I don't know for sure how long the mine was going on, but quite a while, I think. And there was a lot of people around Hillsboro that weren't quite to Hillsboro, but around Gold Dust there, and that's where their kids went to school. But it had already shut down when I started the school. So.
What do you think, in looking back over your lifetime of Sierra County, what brought people in? What do you think was a real driver for bringing people into the area, and how the populations shifted in our county?
Well, it seemed like after the Second World War, everything changed, you know. But there was a lot of people that came from like Oklahoma and Texas, and later after I got bigger and talked to a lot of kids that I went to school with. That's why they had come here for their parents or aunts or uncles or grandparents' help, and a lot of them took the hot baths. And I think that's what really drew them here at first. And I don't know.
Well, and also that would have been during the 30s as well. I mean, that there a lot of people moved out of we were having our own issues here with the depression and with the drought, but
Oklahoma and Texas, parts of Texas were in heck of a shape.
There you go. They were a lot worse off than we were, because at least we had the river, even though it might not have had that much water in it. We did have, the river, and there was some farmland or bottomland that people could farm in.
And a lot of people left because they had to. They were starved out, and some of them got as far as Hot Springs, and I guess that's all the money they had for gas. Even though gas was cheap as heck, you don't have money, you don't have nothing. So they'd stop and get a job, or and there was a lot of I don't know. Ann, do you remember how many dry goods stores and cafes and gas stations and
It's a lot more than there are now.
yeah. And every store that I can remember going into had one of these, what they call them, one-armed bandits, you know. So,
Oh, yeah.
so they could find them a job, you know, doing something.
Right.
Yeah. 'Cause
What do you remember about the gambling days with the one-armed bandits?
I didn't even hardly know what gambling was, because you know my grandpa was a missionary preacher, and boy, there was no, they wouldn't even let us play cards. Grandma would take them and stick them in the stove.
Gee.
Now,
She would.
what grandma was this? What was her name?
Mally Gordon.
Okay, so
Yeah, that was my dad's mama.
Uh-huh.
She was little. She wasn't even 5 foot tall, and she weighed about 80 pounds. But boy, she could sure make you feel about that. And they used to live with us because after they moved up to Guyena, up there in Rio Arriba County, and it was cold as heck in the winter, and they both had real bad arthritis and stuff, so they just come down and stay with us during the winter. And so she ruled the roost, I'll tell you.
and there wasn't going to be any gambling in her house.
No way.
But were the one-armed bandits that when you would go into the stores, were they just out on the?
Yeah,
Just-
anybody could go and stick their money in there. Yeah, they were all over.
And when you came back after you finished your education in El Paso, by then things had started changing here in Hot Springs. I mean, they started trying to clean up the gambling and the houses of prostitution and
Yeah.
different.
I didn't even know what a prostitute was. A lot of these things that were going on, you know, when you're off on a ranch, you don't know. You don't get there. You're so darn busy trying to make a living that you don't pay no attention. And in them days, kids were to be seen and not heard, you know. And every time they turned us loose while we was outside playing, kick the can or wolf over the river or some of them old games that we used to play. And I had a whole bunch of cousins, and we'd get together and we had a good time. I got 2 cousins left. That's all.
Oh my.
Yeah, that's all of that bunch.
Now, living down by the river, do you ever remember any stories about La Llorona? Did you never, nothing?
I never heard of that until, remember when they used to write about it in the newspaper? And she was mostly up there around Palomas, I think.
Mhm.
I'd heard that, but I never heard of it myself. But there was a lot of people that had a lot of, you know, old-fashioned beliefs and stuff.
Superstitions?
Yeah.
What do you remember about the dances at Lake Valley? Did you ever?
Heck, before Lake Valley was even ever started, we used to go to Ingle and Caballo, and there wasn't any at Palomas that I can remember. But once in a while, Hillsboro, and my mom and dad would, I remember the first pickup we ever had was it was in, I think 39, maybe 40, and Dick was the driver. And my dad never learned how to drive. That way he didn't have to go anywhere by himself.
There was a method to his madness.
I remember I was 12 years old. It was in 1942. And we came up, we had an old, kind of a dark green pickup that had to last us all through the war because there was none being made. You couldn't buy one. Anyway, Mr. Osborne was the police chief, and he was down there on Foch Street. And we walked in, there was just this little old table, I remember, and thing that he wrote out. And Daddy told him, he said, I want to get this kid some driver's license. And he looked and he said, does she know how to drive? And he said, how the hell do you think I got up here?
He was telling that to the chief of police, right?
Yeah. So he wrote out my driver's license. I think Daddy gave him $2 or something. That was it. I mean, no driver's test, no nothing. I remember then we went and got a load of cottonseed cake loaded in the back of the pickup, because all the pickups had sideboards in, you know, horse trailers hadn't been invented, or I wish they had. But anyway, I can remember when we were going home, we had a blowout going down Saco Hill. I just went right into the, you know, you couldn't turn them. There was no such thing as power steering.
That's right.
Boy, you got muscles. Oh yeah, we had a hard life, but we had a lot of fun too.
Now, you had a ranch, or your dad did, out north of town here a little ways.
That was Needmore. He named that the Needmore Ranch.
And I asked him that one time. I was a little bitty kid, and I said, "How come you call it the Needmore?" And he said, "'Cause it needs more of every damn thing."
Did you ever drink any water that came
No.
out that well? Oof, it was just like sal hepatica. Oh, man, that stuff, cows and stuff, they wouldn't hardly drink it until they got so darn thirsty they had to. Yeah, that was terrible.
Now, where was that north of town? Was that out there where the...
Right off of the old highway, right north of, what's that little town up there? The guy that sells butane. What was his name? Greenwood Lodge.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
North of
just
there.
past there, and then you turn off toward the lake.
Okay.
And I can remember when I was we got 2 weeks off a year from Hotel Du. I mean, boy, them nuns, they worked the hell out of you, I'll tell you. And one time I came home around Christmas, and it was cold and windy, and all I did was help Daddy ride that lake. You know, there was one guy up there, I think on Monticello Point or something. I can't even remember his name. And there where the big thing is where you put your boats in the water, there was one swing set, and that was it. All the rest, he had leased it all, and had a bunch of cows up there, and we had to round them all up and take them down to, we'd drive them down to below Dairy there. He'd lease cotton fields and lettuce, and they didn't raise that much chili at that time. It was mostly cotton, and we'd have to go down there and build fence. Then we'd have to drive them cows down and let them, boy, they'd pick up all of that cotton, and had cotton seed in it. You know, it was both good feed. They really get them fat on that. They even liked the chili, the lettuce that was frozen, you know, that was left in the fields before they plowed them under. And they really liked the red chili. So we were always working, boy, I'll tell you.
Now, how did you drive the cattle down? Did you ever take a cattle drive across the dam?
Oh yeah, a lot of times. But when we went down the road, I can remember one time, I don't know, do you remember Phil Bates? He never was in the service because he had the eye out. Anyway, he worked for my dad quite a while. And we were going down there by the Greenhorn, and there wasn't hardly any people living there or anything. We was going down there, and this old lady come along with this big black car. She knocked the cow down. Boy, you didn't mess with Daddy with his cows. And man, boy, they had a few thousand words. And she said, "Get these damn cows off of the highway." And he said, "You know what you can do?" He said, "You can go straight to hell." He said, "I've been paying taxes all my life. By God, I'll use this highway anytime I want to." She started to run over that cow, and he got his rope down. Whop! Boy, he put a dent in her car. Oh, hell broke loose. We were back there laughing because we knew she wasn't going to push him around.
About what year was that?
Oh, heck, I don't know. That was in the 40s.
I wonder if that was Rosie Messenger with her big brook.
No,
Was it a
I
big...
think so. It was out of state.
Oh, okay. But that sounded like Rosie Messenger.
No,
You knew Rosie, didn't you?
I heard of her. But anyway, then this pop truck, with all the bottles of pop came along. Old Phil Bates was real skinny and he had a Levi jumper on, and he was back there where the driver couldn't see him, and he was putting inside all different kind of pop. He had about 50 big old pop. After the guy went on through and took off, here we were drinking pop.
So now explain again exactly where the road was that you would drive the cattle on.
The old Highway 85.
Oh, Highway 85, and so you went then
all the way down to Derry, and then we'd have to drive them over where we'd fenced in different cotton fields, and Daddy'd rent them from those farmers.
So you must have taken them right down through downtown Hot Springs too, because that's where old 85 went.
No, because we lived at Caballo, and most of our cows were in that area.
Okay, all right. But when you were talking about being up here,
Well, Daddy bought that place later.
Oh, okay.
So I kind of missed out on that, and I was glad. I never liked it in the first place.
Because it needed
needed
more.
Yeah.
Yeah, you needed more.
Yeah. So.
Well, any other stories that you would like to share with the audience about growing up in Sierra County? And
I just know that at that time it was a good place to raise kids, because all the kids we were all in the same boat, We had to have shoe stamps, sugar stamps, coffee stamps, lard stamp, everything. And I remember you got 2 shoe stamps a year, and heck, our feet would grow. I remember Daddy would cut the toes out of the shoe, and he had a lasting stand, and he'd half soled our shoes. And but then it got to where they made such sorry shoes that you couldn't even have soled them. The way they made them, you couldn't do that. So anyway, I think it would do kids good to have to live like that today, or they don't really know how good I really tell my grandkids, I chew them out good. And because we would trade, because we raised our own. Daddy'd buy a couple of hogs in the summer, and then when it got cold, we'd butcher them. But we always had beef. And I can remember when we didn't even have electricity until I was a senior in high school.
so that would have been about 1945?
47.
47?
47, 48. I remember the very first thing we got was electric iron. Boy, that was just heaven. Instead of having them old sad irons that you had to build a big fire and heat them on. And
Now, how many grandkids do you have?
I've got 13.
Oh,
I've got 9 grandsons and 4 granddaughters.
okay. You want to give us some names? Think you can name them all?
Yeah, I can name them all.
13.
Yeah, Don has 2 boys. My oldest daughter has 2 boys, Sean and Eric. And Sean Rooney, he's in the Air Force, and so is his wife. And they've got one little girl that I've never seen, but they're coming sometime this month. She was born in Germany. And then Eric, her youngest son, has 3 little boys, Sam, Ben, and Eli. And then Mike has Pate, Lene, and Dally. And Adam has Dalton, Case, and Brolin. Matthew has Arliss and Regan. And Becca has Corey, Aubrey, and Avery. So, I've got some step grandkids and step great grandkids in Hawaii, but these are just my regular. So, yeah, I've got a whole bunch. In fact, the youngest one is on the 7th. She'll be 5 months old.
So that's going to be what, 5 generations? You have 5 generations or 4 generations?
My great grandma and grandpa, they're buried down at the old Caballo cemetery. My great grandparents, my grandparents, my parents, my brother and sister, and some nephews. Six generations are buried down there. In fact, my dad's sister and her husband, Aunt Willie and Uncle Roy Johnson, gave that land to the Caballo church. Their daughter was the first one buried there. She was, that's when they used to have these old long dresses and petticoats, and they were burning weeds or something out there, and she got on fire and she died. That was before I was ever born. But,
and so that's the Caballo Cemetery
Caballo
that you go
Cemetery, yeah.
underneath the interstate, and you're up on
yeah.
the Caballo. Okay. So she was the first. What year was she buried out there? Do you remember? Late 20s or?
Somewhere in the 20s, because it was before my mom and dad ever got married, so it must have been. I don't know exactly when.
And that would have been the Gordons that gave the land to the cemetery?
Well, she was a Gordon. My aunt was a Gordon, and her husband was Roy Johnson.
Johnson, okay.
Mhm.
So they gave
And
the
he
land.
was from Alamogordo. In fact, after Aunt Willie died and Grandma helped him raise those boys, and then they moved back to Alamogordo, and they were finished raised over there.
It seems like that our area has swapped. A lot of families will move to Tularosa, the basin over there, and then they come back over here, and then they move back over there. They move back and forth across the San Andres Mountains. So.
Yeah, one time Faye and I went over to see if we could find my grandma's grave over there in Tularosa, and we never could find it. Because my mom's mother and father got a divorce when she was little. And my grandmother died when my mom was 7. And in the meantime, she had married Mike McDonald. And I don't know nothing about him, but people have told me he wasn't nothing but a drunk. But anyway, she had a half brother and a half sister. And a while back, Edna, Dick's wife, called me and told me, she said, there was a woman called me, and she was Aunt Maggie's daughter, and she's going to be coming through here in September, I think the 21st or something, and so we're going to get together, and so she's a cousin of mine, or half cousin or whatever.
That's neat. That's neat.
Now, was your mother expected to do all of the housework and all the sewing and all of this,
yeah.
and ran the calves and
Yeah,
do all
she
that?
used to help Daddy break broncs and everything, before she had any kids. And heck, when the lake came in, we were always digging out a cow out of bog. We had some big old long timbers and ropes and stuff that we'd take with us, because sometimes if them cows, they'd be there with their nose just up, just if they put their head down, they'd drown.
Right.
So we'd have to dig them out, and the darn old idiots would turn right around and go back in the lake, and here we'd do it again.
But that's a very good example of why when the Spanish were coming through, I mean, they avoided all the lowlands over here because of their caratas, and then later their horses and all the sheep and the goats. I mean, they would have all been. It would have taken any kind of a caravan forever if they would have ever gotten up this side of the river because of all the lowlands.
Yeah, not only that, they had something to eat there, so kind of hard to drive a bunch of sheep and cows and horses that are hungry. They wouldn't eat, and it'd be hard as heck to
keep everything moving and make it on a schedule.
I can remember when we were kids down there before we moved up the creek. Mama would get Daddy to load this big old pot, and I still got that pot, big old iron pot, in the wagon, and we'd load all. First you'd have to go down to the river and see if the water was very clear, and if it was pretty clear, we'd go down there and we'd unload it, and we'd gather wood and cow chips and build a fire and heat the water, and then haul water, for the rinse water, and I remember she had a scrub board for her, and one for Sitter, and one for Faye, and one for me. Scrubbing them.
Automatic washers.
Yeah.
Take your big pan down, your big huge pot down there,
And then the tubs, and
wash all the clothes.
I can remember Daddy got her a washing machine with a motor on it. Boy, that was just like heaven to us. Man, that they washed, and, you know, we'd put them through the wringer, and I got my arm caught in that wringer one time. You know, you had to hit that thing to loosen it. I think Mama got some rattle. She run it back out. But anyway, I remember we used to have clotheslines there, but we'd have so darn many dirty clothes that we'd have to hang them on the barbed wire fence, and then sometimes we'd hang some on mesquite bushes.
The bushes, let it go, the wind dry everything.
Yeah. Not everybody had a clothesline, I'll tell you. Times were really hard. People just don't know how hard they were.
Well, my dad talked about using a plunger, you know, the old plungers for the toilets, and going up and down on the plunger to get the dirt out of their pants. So I mean, that worked, you know, with hot water and an old toilet plunger, so it worked pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, we certainly thank you for this interview, and it's been a pleasure.
Yes, great.
I wanted to show you a picture of the homestead.